Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, December 10th, 2024 at 6:00 p.m. And may you join me in the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. That was beautiful. Okay, roll call.
Commissioner Burke? Commissioner Doris?
Here.
Commissioner Nichols?
Here.
Vice Chair Kine?
Present.
Chair Halley?
Here. Okay, I'm going to open up oral comments from the public, if we have anyone online.
I move to close public comment.
I think I just can move to do that, but I'll second it. Okay, we're closing public comment. Okay, now I need we need to talk about the Planning Commission meetings, minutes from September 10th, 2024, and I would need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of September 10th, 2024.
Second.
A voice vote?
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Okay.
Be sure to make a note that we move the minutes to the 24th. I mean, I know they can be done later, but we really need that one. It was a very important meeting.
All right, so our business tonight is a public hearing to consider adopting Resolution P-2024-3119, recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance to amend Fortuna Municipal Code Title 17 zoning regulations regarding single-room occupancy facilities and find the amendments to be exempt from SEQA.
Good evening, Chair Halley and honorable commissioners. I'm just going to pull up my screen. I'm Sherry Meads, your Community Development Director. Are you guys seeing the presentation?
Sharing screen.
Started screen sharing.
Okay, there we go. All right, let's just get to presentation mode. My computer is super slow, and I apologize for that. Here we go. All right. So tonight we are here. There are two ordinances tonight that are both similar in nature in a sense that they are to implement the city's housing element. First one we're going to talk about is a new chapter in the code for single-room occupancy facilities, and I'll just jump right in. So, as mentioned, the subject is for you guys to consider whether to recommend approval to the City Council to amend the Fortuna Municipal Code to add the section about single-room occupancy facilities, and then amend other sections of the code where they will be allowed, whether conditionally or permitted by right. Another thing before you is the CEQA determination of exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15162 and 15061B3. We'll get into that a little bit later. So just a little bit of background for why we're here. The City Council adopted the city's general plan housing element back in 2019, and that was looking for through a planning horizon of 2027. And the housing element is a required element of the general plan by the state of California Housing and Community Development. It actually has to be certified by them to be considered in effect. And part of what the housing element does is it looks at what housing the city has and how to increase housing to provide housing for all. So one of the housing elements is program H15, and this was one highlighted in a recent conversation with HCD that they wanted to see us go ahead and do some implementation on. So I've developed an ordinance that supports the development of housing for extremely low-income households by amending the zoning ordinance to allow for single-room occupancies, often called SROs, and in compliance with state law. So the Fortuna Municipal Code, Section 1707-200, outlines what needs to happen before the general plan or the zoning ordinance can be amended. So your role tonight is to hold a public hearing, consider any public comment there may be, the staff report, the proposed ordinance, the CEQA determination, and determine whether you feel comfortable making a recommendation that City Council takes the next step of adopting an ordinance to the zoning amendments. So a little definition, single-room occupancy facility, in case you're not familiar with it, it's a very small multifamily residential building. It has to have at least 2 single-room occupancy units, a common gathering and open space, laundry facilities, potentially management office, or potentially based on the size, live on-site manager, and other ancillary features necessary to maintain the SRO facility. So if the SRO dwelling units, which I will define in the next slide, do not have full eating and bathroom facilities, the facility itself has to provide those in more of a shared function. And it's usually based on a number per floor or per units. So next is a single-room occupancy dwelling unit, and they are regulated by size. There's a minimum here. We recommend 150 square feet for one person, 200 square feet minimum for 2 people, and a maximum floor area of 350 square feet. It can only accommodate 2 people. These are not designed, they're too small, they're not designed to be for families. And as you can see, there's other restrictions or guidelines that create a functional single-room occupancy dwelling unit. So in determining where SRO should be allowed, the state requires that you allow them anywhere that residential uses are allowed under the same type of restriction, meaning that if multifamily is allowed by right, SROs have to be allowed by right. If a multifamily unit requires a conditional use permit, then we can require that an SRO facility requires a conditional use permit. All SROs are going to be required to comply with the medium density residential density, open space, and setback requirements. So where they would be principally permitted is the multifamily residential zoning district, neighborhood commercial zoning district, retail commercial zoning district, and anywhere homeless shelters are allowed. Where they would be allowed with an approved use permit is the commercial thoroughfare zoning district, light industrial, heavy industrial, and again, wherever homeless shelters are allowed, that would require a conditional use permit. And again, as I mentioned, all of the SRO facilities, wherever they are located, are subject to the multifamily density, open space, and setback requirements. So the ordinance lays out height requirements, the management plan, when bathroom facilities are required, on-site management, parking, and common area. I didn't list every single one because they are in your packet, as well as the Exhibit A, which provides the text that would be included with the zoning amendment. So for dwelling units, there are additional requirements, again, based on that 2-person occupancy limit, the size, tenancy. In other words, somebody can't have an SRO dwelling unit when they also have a unit somewhere else. They're not using it for a vacation or, hey, I want 2 places to live, and so this looks like a good place. This needs to be where they live. Requirements around the fact that they have to comply with building code and other municipal code. They have to be accessible when required. They need a closet, and all of that, again, is detailed in your ordinance attached to the Exhibit A attached to your ordinance. So as I mentioned, the SRO ordinance is exempt from further evaluation with CEQA because all of the housing element programs were already analyzed in the general plan EIR, and there are no substantial changes or new information that would merit subsequent analysis of the amendments. And then if, for some reason, the amendments were considered a separate project, they would be exempt under Section 15061B3, which exempts projects which can be seen that there would be no potential that the activity would have a significant effect on the environment. The amendment aligns with our general plan, housing element policies, programs, and state regulations. So both ordinances, I'll say the same thing each time. The annual budget has paid for me to write this ordinance, and then we have a legal assistant budget where this was sent out to the on-call attorney for him to review and make sure I didn't make any mistakes, and that's covered. Although it would be nice if HCD provided funding for these unfunded mandates, that's not in the books. So the recommended commission action would be to adopt Resolution P 2024-3119, recommending that the City Council adopt amendments to Fortuna Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning regulations regarding single-room occupancy facilities and finding the amendments to be exempt from additional California Environmental Quality Act review under CEQA guidelines sections 15162 and 15061B3. Next steps are City Council introduction and first reading on December 16th. City Council adoption, second reading and adoption will be the first meeting in January 2025. Once the amendments are adopted, staff will file a notice of exemption as required by CEQA, and then the ordinance would become effective 30 days after adoption. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you for the presentation. That was interesting. Do you have any questions?
I wanted to ask, it sounds like there's two separate possibilities. You had mentioned there was one where it could be single room with communal space, say on a floor or something like that, and then the other one will be single occupancy dwelling. Is there any middle ground that someone could try to find where it'd be like single occupancy dwelling, where the communal space would say be someone's residence and like they rent out their approved shed, basically, something like that that meets the square footage, has a closet, but maybe doesn't have a restroom and cooking space, but has everything else, power and heating and things like that.
So single-room occupancy units are not allowed standalone. We're allowing single-room facilities, so there have to be at least two of them.
That's what I wanted to ask.
And they have to meet building code standards, and it's not likely a shed would.
That's all I need to know.
Yes.
I have a question. I know.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody just hold still for a minute. Why are they in the, see, I've never done this before. You're good. Why are they included in industrial zones, where the only residents that I could see in the industrial zone ones were for like watchmen and guards and stuff, not people who just lived there?
So watchmen and guards live in the industrial zones. They are considered residential units there. And so because that is allowed with, I think it requires a conditional use permit, this would be allowed as well. Obviously, it would be evaluated to make sure it was safe, make sure, it met all the requirements. That's why it requires a conditional use permit rather than being allowed by right. If it wasn't appropriate, it wouldn't be approved.
It just seems like they're employed and they're just doing their job being there, rather than, just people moving into an industrial zoning place. Seems kind of,
Yeah, so caretaker unit actually means they live on site.
yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. And
For a reason.
And these are hopefully, passed through as people get
On their feet.
better opportunities, but, yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
Any other questions or comments, concerns?
I got a question about the density. You said they count towards like you allow so many dwelling units per acre, so each one of those rooms would count as a dwelling unit? Is that-
It's the same thing as the multifamily. It's the same density as that, yes.
Okay. All right.
In the packet, it talked about essentially that we run the risk of being out of compliance with the state if we don't do this, and that we potentially would not qualify for grant funding. Is that correct? Could you expand just a little bit on that?
Yeah, so As I mentioned, housing elements have to be certified by the state, and the state requires you to implement them to remain in certified status. The city has already been involved in litigation in 2018 for not having a certified housing element to the tune of $53,000. And HCD is fully staffed right now, and they are very heavy on enforcement. They reached out to us about what housing element implementation has occurred, and we're working through what they want us to prioritize. So we do, I mean, this is state mandated.
So we have to do it.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, any other questions? And do I read the motion or just ask for a motion? Do I read it again?
You're going to ask for a motion in a second, and when you receive the second, I'll read the ordinance by title.
Oh, I thought we did, oh. Not for public comment, not. We don't need public comment. Yeah, we do. Right now.
You'll open it and then close it.
Sorry.
She's busy. She want to say something? Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I don't have any participants via Zoom right now.
So I'll open public comment and I'll close public comment. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move to adopt Resolution P 2024-3119.
I'll second.
Resolution P 2024-3119, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Fortuna recommending City Council adopt an ordinance to amend Fortuna Municipal Code Title 17 zoning regulations regarding single-room occupancy facilities and make findings and determinations that the amendments are exempt from additional California Environmental Quality Act review under CEQA guidelines section 15162 and 15061B3. Commissioner Burke?
Yes.
Commissioner Doris?
Yes.
Commissioner Nichols?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kine?
Yes.
Chair Halley?
Yes. Okay, very good. So our next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider adopting a resolution P-2024-3120, recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance to amend Fortuna Municipal Code Title 17 zoning regulations to add Chapter 1710 reasonable accommodations policy and procedures and find the amendments to be exempt from secret.
Okay, so good evening again, Chair Halley and honorable commissioners. I'm still Sherry Meads, your Community Development Director. I'm going to pull up my next presentation, which is going to look very similar to what we just looked at. And again, it is the same situation where we are, it's the right thing to do anyways. I mean, I was actually rather surprised when I got here. Hold on, it's not going into presentation mode. There we go. That we didn't already have a request for reasonable accommodations policy. So as mentioned, that's what we're looking at with this item. So I'm just going to dive in. Again, this is to amend the zoning code to add a chapter, to add a reasonable accommodations policy and procedure, and to determine the amendments to be exempt from further California Environmental Quality Act review through recommending council adoption. Again, this is all based on the housing element that was adopted back in 2019. The housing element fulfills state of California requirements to provide housing for all with no impediments for people that are disabled under the acts, which are defined in the ordinance. So this particular presentation implements Housing Element Program H18, which was listed in the housing element to develop and formalize a general process for reasonable accommodations. Again, your role tonight is to consider staff report presentation, any public comment, the amendments, and then provide a written recommendation through a resolution recommending council adoption of the amendments and making a finding of CEQA exemption. So the purpose and intent of this new chapter is to provide a procedure for persons with disabilities to request a reasonable accommodation from Fortuna's zoning laws or rules, policies, practices, and procedures to ensure equal access to housing pursuant to California's Fair Housing Act and Fair Employment and Housing Act. So that's what combined, those two acts are called the acts, and they provide definitions for a person with a disability and regulations that jurisdictions have to follow. And that's what we're looking at tonight. So as you can see here, a person with a disability is any person who has a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities, anyone who is regarded as having an impairment, or anyone who has a record of such impairment. Federal and as local fair housing laws do not protect an individual's current unlawful use of substances or other drugs unless that individual has a separate disability aside from that. So a request for reasonable accommodation, as I mentioned, would be, for example, if somebody's child had severe anxiety and so therefore they wanted to build a taller fence so that the child would feel more safe in their backyard, the city would evaluate that and determine that it was necessary for that child to enjoy a legal dwelling unit or the ancillary features of a dwelling unit. Another example could be if somebody needs to build a wheelchair ramp in a setback, obviously that would be something that the city would want to honor. So the applicability, a request can be made by the person with disabilities, their representative, or any entity when the application of zoning or other land use regulation, policy, or practice is a barrier to fair housing. And as mentioned, it can be something about siting, development and use, and this is further elucidated in your staff report. So for someone to apply for a reasonable request for accommodation, they do need to supply a written request with this information at the minimum. And then as the ordinance, the resolution outlines, and the ordinance would adopt, there is a procedure for the community development director to review the material and provide a written answer within 30 days. There's an appeal procedure if for some reason there was any negative declaration and somebody was appealing that adverse decision. So again, this is another one that's exempt from further environmental review because it was already reviewed as part of the general plan EIR process, and there's no additional information that would merit subsequent analysis of the amendments to add this chapter to the zoning code. And to the extent that the amendments are a separate project, then they would be exempt under CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, because there is no possibility that the activity in question may have a significant effect on the environment, since it is in alignment with the Fortuna Municipal Code and General Plan Housing Element policies, programs, and state regulations. Again, I'm covered by the budget, and the legal assistance is also part of the general fund. Once again, HCD, if you're listening, give us money. Same recommended commission action, that you guys recommend that City Council approve these amendments to the Fortuna Municipal Code to bring us into compliance with the housing element as well as state requirements, and also to do the right thing for people with disabilities. Next steps are the same. We're going to go to City Council and introduce and do a first reading on the 16th. The ordinance hopefully will be adopted in January. We'll file a notice of exemption as required by CEQA, and then 30 days from adoption, we will actually have a request for reasonable accommodations policy and procedure. And with that, I'm here for any questions.
So just to confirm, everything that would possibly come up would be magisterial, correct? Everything would go through the development office, not necessarily through the planning commission?
In terms of the request for reasonable accommodation, yes, that is separate. Somebody could apply for other entitlements, and the ordinance outlines how that would work together, but it's not dependent upon approval of the other entitlements, it is its own standalone thing, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's exactly what I
perfect.
thought was the case. Just wanted to make sure.
Yes. It's a great question, actually.
Any other questions?
It's mine for the month.
Okay, do I open public comment? Yes, I will open public comment. And I'll close public comment. Nobody's, all right, on the line. So do I have a motion for item B on the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve item B on the agenda, which is adopting resolution P 2024-3120.
Second.
Resolution P 2024-3120, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Fortuna recommending City Council amend Fortuna Municipal Code Title 17 zoning regulations to add Chapter 17.10 reasonable accommodations policies and procedures and find the amendment to be exempt from additional California Environmental Quality Act review under CEQA Guidelines Section 15162 and 15061B3. Commissioner Burke?
Yes.
Commissioner Doris?
Yes.
Commissioner Nichols?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kine?
Yes.
Chair Holly?
Yes. Okay. Well, I think our next item on the agenda is Planning Commission staff communication. Do we have any?
I'm just happy to be here with you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
been a while.
Thank you very much.
So hopefully we'll be having some other items coming to you very soon. And thank you for your patience as we are a little slower than usual with the staffing challenges we're facing right now.
No, and thank you very much.
Yes, and a big shout out and thanks to Sienna for chairing this meeting.
Thank you. Yes, Yana, thank you. And Sherry, you're awesome.
We're a pretty good
And
team.
I'm thinking of Katie, wherever she is. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, are we done? Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yay.